So welcome, you guys. This is a faculty panel. As you can see, we have some faculty with us today to help answer questions. The topics that we're going to be focusing on is portfolio tips, because that's the main point of conversation that usually occurs. My name is Molly. I'm the Associate Director for Graduate Recruitment, and I'll be happy to answer any of your admissions and financial aid questions separately, but we really just want to focus on faculty advice about the portfolio today. Jen?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Hewins, and I work with Molly in admissions with graduate recruitment. As Molly mentioned, we're happy to answer any questions that you have on the application process. Feel free to email us at admissions@risd.edu with any of your questions. After this, we're happy to help you along the way.
Yeah, and one thing I did note, this is an open Q&A. So what that means is start typing your questions in the Q&A portion of Zoom right away. I'm sure you already have some questions and you've been thinking about. Type them in the Q&A. We're going to go through first come, first serve. We're not going to go through and do any repetitive questions. But if you do type your question in the chat, it will get lost. We're going to be putting a lot of links to what the faculty are talking about in there. We don't want it to get lost. So put your questions in the Q&A. Let's get started with faculty. I'm just going to start with Sean because he's next to me in this cube.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Greenlee. I'm the department head for the Department of Digital Media. I'm also the faculty lead for our Studio for Research in Sound and Technology. Glad to answer any questions I can.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's do Marianne.
Hi, Marianne Frio from the Department of Textiles. I'm currently the interim graduate program director. Annie's Masakian, you can look at her information online. She's on sabbatical, but she'll be back in March and she'll be participating in the admission cycle. But meanwhile, I'm here and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Marianne. Let's go to Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Gendel, and I'm the graduate program director of the painting department. Also happy to answer your questions.
Awesome, thanks. And then Leslie Baker.
Hi, I'm the department head and graduate program director of ceramics. So also happy to answer questions.
Great. It looks like we have just one question. And let's see, okay. The type is so small. Is this session going to be the same as the previous webinar on October 3rd? No. I know that the Q&A portion is different, but what about the presentation and examples? So that is a admissions portfolio tip session. That's about the nuts and bolts of it. How to use slide room, how do I apply multiple page PDFs, that kind of thing. Today, we're going to be asking questions to these faculty members about maybe what they would want to see in the portfolio or not, or tips about where to start, how to begin, and really the best advice that they can give to students.
Piggyback on Molly. And all of these sessions, we will never provide you with examples of this is the portfolio that will get you into RISD. There is no template, for getting in. We share the instructions with you. Some departments have specific requirements, others do not. But we don't have a clear template of if you follow this, you'll get into RISD. It's really, part of the challenge of the application process to curate your own portfolio. It's a challenge. So everyone's is different, and we want everyone's to be different. We don't want everyone's to be the same or follow the same cookie cutter portfolio. So
yeah, there's no prescription. We leave it open-ended on purpose. That being said, we can give you some tips and tricks. So let's see. This one is in regards to the MFA and illustration program. So illustration will be held on the 17th of October. Jen can put a link in the chat about where to sign up for that one. Next question. How are the portfolios supposed to be, like a PDF file with selective work or just a website link? Anyone want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I guess it's a PDF file. I'm not, but definitely not a website link. We can always find your website if we're looking for it. We want websites don't curate specifically for the application. They're more general. So we're really looking for a curated portfolio for the application.
I mean,
Absolutely.
don't the students put their images into a prompt, you know, like the admissions has a place where you put your images in and it makes it so we can see them. It's not really a PDF. It's more like you insert your images one by one into the program, I think.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And you know, so I think if you're giving us a website, you're showing us everything. That is not curating 10 to 20 images or pages with maybe one, maybe two images max on it. Up to 20 of them, minimum of 10. Go to slideroom.com. You'll find all of the formatting suggestions there. But we want to see, out of all the work you've done, what are you choosing to show us? That is the challenge and what we're asking you to do, and it's part of the application process.
Can I just add one thing is so on the website for the admissions, you'll find also that some departments have specific portfolio requests. So I think that's an important thing to check for the department you're applying to. For instance, in digital media, we request that you do not submit multi-page PDFs into the 10 examples that you could submit, because that is, you know, we're asking you to kind of curate a little bit further than that, right? So it should really just be one representative PDF if it's, you know, one page, right? If you're submitting that.
And Sean, I'm just gonna say flat out, we do not permit anyone to submit multiple page PDFs. That is, again, just not curating. Each image has to be one page. That is the challenge. You can upload one document that's 75 pages long, you know, that's a little sneaky. We don't want that. That's not following the directions. And that's why you're here today, to learn what we are looking for. And that's one page. No formatting. We love a full bleed. We love to see that the color is corrected. We love great photos of work. Think about the way of what the best way to show your work. That might be a video, that might be a GIF, a time lapse, that might be showing us a installation shot so we understand scale, right? There are a lot of variables to the context of the work, and you want to make sure that you're showing us the work in the best way possible. All right, Jen, what are you seeing out there for questions? Oh, you want Marianne? Yes.
Just in terms of that singular image, occasionally students put multiple, or applicants, excuse me, put multiple images on a page, and that can be appropriate sometimes, like, but we often, in textiles, we often get these pages that are like crammed with a million little images. It's like a process that maybe happens in a school, that undergrad program an applicant went to. It doesn't really help us see the work. It's really hard to see. We can't really tell what we're looking at. So really, each page should have a real clarity to it and not be crammed with like literally 20 images of, you have to curate those pages as well.
Yeah, that's definitely one of our pieces of advice in our admissions tips and tricks, is to not overcrowd the page, because we can't really zoom on this platform. And so think about the best way possible. I mean, you could even find family and friends and be like, can you understand this? Are you reading this well? And, you know, hopefully someone is honest with you and says that, no, it's too confusing, right? So get feedback where you have resources, colleagues, and of course, faculty, mentors, things like that. The next question is a really good one we get for all of our MFA programs here, and really in fine arts, D+M included as well. Are you interested in seeing a breadth of work showing different topics and techniques and skills? Or do you prefer seeing something more concentrated around a single topic? I think this is a question about skills versus practice, right? So maybe we can answer it in that way. Jackie, it's for a painting person, so I'm going to call you out on that one.
Yeah. I think it's you know, having what is the number of images that they have? Is it 20 or 15?
10 to 20, 10 minimum, 20 being the max.
Okay, so for painting, I recommend including 20 images. I recommend them being 1 image per page, not too many details. I think that we want to see somebody who has a very rigorous practice, who is interested in knowing as much about their, whatever their realm of interests are. That's like, what are you reading? What are you looking at? Like, what have you studied? What makes you interested in the world and a curious person? In terms of breadth of work, like it gets confusing if somebody doesn't, if you can't like see your voice in it, like if it's just about like your skill. Like it's easy to see. We've all looked at so much work over the years that your skill is going to come out. And I think that people were interested in like seeing your voice and seeing what your curiosities are and seeing, that you have like an interest in growing and learning, and that you're not like a fully resolved artist already, so that's at the beginning. There's more to it than that too, but
Yeah, the way I try to break it down to students who are at this phase of applying is that their skills are like a toolbox. These are tools in your toolbox, right? But it's more important for us to see how you're using them and why you're using them, not that you can use all of these things, right? So yeah, that's great, Jackie. Thank you. So this one is a ceramics question. Should the portfolio have a digital layout, or would just the images of the work suffice?
I'm not exactly sure what a digital layout means, but
Okay, yeah, I think what they mean is like maybe formatted in some way.
okay. I'm gonna say, and kind of just what Jackie just said, an image, just focusing on the image. One thing I was thinking about as you were speaking, Jackie, was the type of work, since you're getting into 3-dimensional work, if you do installation work, the number of images for something like that versus if you're doing pottery and focusing on one smaller object. So if it is installation work, just give us the amount that you think needs to communicate, but we do need details. I had a student on our end applying for something somewhere else and had been advised to only do an overview shot, and it was really hard to understand the installations. So we really need to understand that. And also one more, that you also have the opportunity to have a description. So please use that. We look to that a lot in terms of what the materials are, if it's mixed media, scale. You can just add little comments within that description that helps us understand the work a little more than that. So that's where the image is just the image, and then you can do description. And Jackie wants to add on.
I just want to add that our program is really big tent too. So my description was kind of if you were applying with like a straight painting portfolio, but you can completely apply to painting with sculptures, with installations as well. And in following Leslie's advice, like don't do half your portfolio with your installation, but you're allowed to show like an installation shot and then a close-up of a work or something from the installation as well.
Absolutely. Great points. Thank you, guys. Jen, what are the kind of questions are we seeing out there in the same exact one over?
Yep, and I just want to reiterate, please be sure you're typing your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom so we can answer them on the first come, first served basis. We'll try to answer as many as we can, but I see a lot of questions going in the chat, so just copy and paste them over into the Q&A. All right, this question is for you, Sean, for Digital Plus Media. How do you suggest going about submitting work with film, music, sound that are not our own? I have work that synthesizes a lot of material to create new meaning, like moving collage work. Is it allowed? Does that kind of work hurt your portfolio?
Okay, yeah, I would say it doesn't hurt your portfolio. I think what's important is that, like if you're thinking, well, I think there's kind of 2 ways I could kind of imagine this. So one would be like you're kind of sampling or appropriating other people's work into your work, and in which case I think it's important to give some kind of credit or mention in your description of the work. So when you upload your work, you can actually, there's a place to put in a description there. So you could do that. And then if it's collaborative work, for instance, I think it's really important that you clearly identify what your individual contribution was to that work. So let's say you were collaborating with a composer, you were doing the video as an example. You'd want to make sure that your people that are reviewing the portfolio understand that you didn't create that music, right? But you created the video portion of it. So I think that that's hopefully answers the question.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sean. And
I
I
have-
have, go ahead, Molly.
I have a question for Marianne, for textiles here. In textiles portfolio, can we include paintings, mixed media work, et cetera, et cetera? Even if it's not directly related to textiles, like woven, knit, fabric, dyed, samples, example, et cetera. What is generally preferred in a textile portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to see people's strong or applicants' strongest work. Many of our candidates and people who come into our program do not come out of a textile background. Sometimes they're painters, sculptors, architects. Sometimes they are artists that really want to gear, kind of pivot towards design. Our graduate program is a design program. Our undergraduate is in fine arts and applied design. So just to remember that. If you're looking for like to be a gallery artist, I mean, it's not really the program meant for that. It's really kind of design oriented. But saying that people coming into the program come from all different fields, and we're really looking at the strongest work. So it doesn't have to be a textile based work that you're showing. Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks. And Jackie, I think you're typing an answer to a question kind of in the same vein, like oh geez, how much diversity would you like to see?
Yeah,
I think that's
it's easier to answer it probably. Just
yeah.
it just depends. It's like we also want to see like your voice and kind of your material experience and how you make things, but we also want to see like a cohesive body of work. And so I think it's like really helpful to show some drawings. If you have drawings and you have paintings and you have a few things that feed off of each other, that's amazing. But I wouldn't want to see like 20 images of things that are completely different from each other. It would be too confusing, so it wouldn't necessarily like show cohesion. So
Yeah, and I think the other way to address some things, maybe a shift in the materials that you're using can be your statement of purpose. Because obviously we know like one thing doesn't just have to be in one skill set, right? We can use different skills in different ways, but that visual perspective, that overarching aesthetic, your practice, right? There's a lot of things that Jackie has already said. Oh, this is great. I love this question because we get it all the time. How much text is allowed in each image? None, if possible, unless your work includes text. That's like part of the work. We don't need the title of what the work is on that page. That page is just for your image or video or format, whatever format you're doing. We have in Sideroom a title, a medium or what media it is. We have a 1,000-word description. I would say use that sparingly. The work should speak for itself, but if context is important, like you built this thing with I don't know, you built it with code somehow, right? So like those sorts of things, like if I didn't know this, I wouldn't understand it. That's where it can be important. But otherwise there should be no text on the page. Slideroom is a image viewing platform, which means text is like a big gray blob if it gets too small, and that defeats the whole purpose. So anyone else have anything counter to that? Because I know that I'm speaking in really broad terms, but
I'm just gonna, the part where you said I didn't realize they could do, it was 1,000 words. Yeah, please don't use that.
don't use them all.
We're already reading so much. We've got your statement, we've got letters of, so if you can just keep that brief, that would be great. Because we really do want to focus on the image, but if you need to use it how you need to use it. If we need more information, especially I think with ceramics and if we get any video submissions, It's like kind of understanding what that context of that video is within the work. So something like that, that's where we want a little more description. But yeah, you do not need to use 1,000 words. I'm good.
Marianne, I think did you want to say something else, Marianne?
I
No,
would
you.
say sometimes in the portfolios textiles receives, the ones that are crammed with many images, which we're trying to
Yeah.
dissuade people from applicants from doing that. It's sometimes we can't tell, is this a digital image it's made? Is it fabricated? Is it real? And so putting exactly what it is, which, as have already been said, what the media is. So it's really clear what everything is. Because digital things can look very real sometimes, and what's made by hand, you're using a digital tool, they're both really can be an important part of a process, but we need to know what we're looking at.
And I also think it's really critical. If you don't understand like how your work should be displayed, come to a portfolio review. There are some times that I look at work and I'm like, that's a really nice rendering. They're like, it's a drawing. And I'm like, wait, what? So, it's important for us to sometimes look at the work digitally because that changes the way you experience the piece. So I'm going to put in the link to the portfolio review. Jackie?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a question here for the MFA portfolio. Are you looking for consistent style and medium, or do you prefer seeing more experimentation? It's kind of a similar question to before, but I sort of just want to say that like sometimes you get like within 20 images, there's actually room to show like a few bodies of work. And sometimes if it's like the same image over and over again, it doesn't, like showing experimentation, I think is actually like a really great thing. So I think that there's room within those 20 images to show a few different bodies of work or a few different things that you do. And sometimes it's really good for us to see like that change in the work because it shows flexibility and it shows more than one path forward. And, like if you, I don't know, it's different for everybody's portfolio, but I like the idea of going to a portfolio review too. I think that's a very good idea.
It's an excellent idea because we can help you reformat. Sometimes it's just sequencing and reformatting, and that makes all the difference. Good photos, and you're like, well, I don't know a photographer. Well, there are ways to go around that. We have some advice for you guys. So come to a portfolio day. I just put the link in there. We have 3 remaining portfolio days. They're all online, so you can join from anywhere in the world. Jen, I'm seeing a lot of the same questions. I know you may be looking at these more than I am. So do you see anything out there?
You may have already touched upon this briefly, but it's a question we get all the time. Do you want to see process images or work in progress, or would you prefer to see final works?
I think all of you could probably answer this because it might be a little bit different for some.
I'm going to say final. If it does need to be process 1 or 2, but we know how you got there usually. So
Usually, yes.
Usually it's true. That's why I said maybe 1 or 2, but again, that's where the description can come in if you want to talk about the process and how you got there. But yeah, that's what I would say for ceramics.
Like you don't need a page of like 16 blocks of like where it started and where it ended, right? Like curate. Anyone else want to add to that?
Just sometimes you're kind of inventing a really unusual process that is integral to the kind of ideas of the work itself, right? But so occasionally, just like Leslie said, occasionally a couple, but it primarily we usually know how you got there, or we can figure that out. So when it's really important to the work, you can add a few.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll just say for digital media, yeah, we actually even encourage you submitting at least 1 video that somehow represents your work process or the research that you do. So that's one of like, several works that we're asking you to submit. But I think through the portfolio, like in digital media, I think it's kind of key to give us some kind of sense of your working process, because it could be so many different things really in that field.
And we're reading them on a computer. We're not seeing them in person. There's almost zero visceral experience. So really thinking about how you're showing the work. it doesn't have to always just be a still image. So I can't express that enough. Slide Room has options for you. What else is out there, Jen? I'm just typing some answers here.
I just want to give some clarification on our portfolio review days. At these sessions, you should be prepared to have something to show our reviewers. Our reviewers consist of alumni from RISD, sometimes faculty, but it's mostly just alumni or RISD representatives. You can expect to get a 10-minute general review. They are not department specific. So these are just people who have, clearly successfully gotten into RISD. They're now in their careers and they're helping out RISD to review portfolios and give you some general guidance. That is what you should know going into it, that it's not going to be department specific. It's not like I'm going to get a textiles review today. You could have somebody from a different field reviewing your portfolio. They're just giving you general guidance. Right.
I see a question here is that it's asking about sculpture, but I think it can pertain to a lot of different programs, as well as sculpture. I have both gallery ready work, and sketchbook, less polished exploratory work. What kind of a balance would you suggest, for the portfolio? If any.
I'd say it kind of goes on with that again, if one is supporting the other in terms of consistency in a direction, because we're kind of really looking, again, I'm going to tag on what Jackie said. You've been voiced it very well, is like where the potential is and where you might go with it, once you get into graduate school. So again, if you're submitting very consistent, very polished work, and we can't see an opening for where it could go from there. So I think if you feel like that supports that, your case for that, how you could grow into this the program you're applying to, that it could work. Again, it's going to be fully on each individual on what's kind of working. Again, in this, again, everybody's saying the curated portfolio, but showing us that little bit of rawness, I think actually would be fine.
And when we say curate, we don't mean perfection, tied up with a bow, all perfect and great too. Curation can be sort of showing us the messiness or the ideas that you are working through, right? And the thought process and how you're thinking can be really critical. Thank you. Anyone else want to touch on that? Okay, we're gonna move on. We got lots of questions. Let's see here.
I have a question here. I'm just typing the answer to it real quick. But this person's asking, writing is important to my artistic practice. Should I include a writing sample in my portfolio? And I'm just saying that we advise everybody this, like writing samples, like CVs, any like background information should not be included in your portfolio. That will be in the application itself. Just focus the portfolio or slide room portfolio on the images. We don't want table of contents. We don't want cover page, all that stuff. Just remove it and just submit the work.
Yeah, there are opportunities to submit other documents. So if we're like, okay, the research is really critical, maybe it was part of a Fulbright, right? Or whatever it was, you can always attach it as another document. It's not a required thing to do, but you could do that if you wanted to, but not in the portfolio. Thank you, Jen.
This is a great question. We get it. We get this question all the time. How many projects should be ideally featured?
Projects versus work versus pages and images. Yeah. Let's break that down.
Mhm.
Anyone want to take a stab?
A project, I mean, people use different terminology, in the field, right? So
Yeah.
a project could also be maybe considered a body of work. And as Jackie was saying, oh, it'd be like good to show multiple bodies of work, multiple projects, maybe not 20 images from one kind of body of work. So like you see a nimbleness of the way you're thinking. So yeah, I don't know if that explains it, but project I'm thinking of it as body of work. But you could have an installation as a project. So it's really we don't want to see one project. We want to see in textiles, you got multiple ideas that are explored, but cohesive, like enough images from that one body of work that you really see a development of a body of work, as opposed to, you know, just a single thing, many different things that don't have any cohesion.
Very well said. Anyone else? Yeah, that was really well said. Great, thank you.
There was just a question for the images for painting, whether you should crop to the edge of the painting or to show the wall. And I say show a little border of the wall around the painting so we can see the whole painting.
Yep, because sometimes it comes off a bit further, and sometimes there's some, I think lighting can be important too. To help.
You could crop a painting and we don't know if it's the whole painting or not. You know, it's like impossible.
Yeah.
So you know, I want to see the whole thing.
Yeah. When I say full bleed, like, I mean, use the full page. There's no reason to have margins, you know, but have like that sense of where is it sitting, on the floor, on the wall, on the side of a building. I think those context can be important. Yeah, thank you. All right. Oh, this is a really good question. We actually got this one in our architecture session too. Which measuring unit should we mention in our project details? Because we don't use the same measuring unit as everyone else. We asked for inches in Slide Room because Slide Room is a US based company. Any advice for these guys? I mean, do you want them all to convert them to inches, or? I say pick your own.
Yeah,
journey.
I say I mean, we have so many international students, and I think even with digital technology, which has pushed us more to metric, I'd say use the unit you're comfortable with. We're fine converting. At least we are in ceramics. No issue with doing conversions.
Yeah, we have to use both in textiles because when we're weighing and measuring, we do it in, you know, the metric system. So yeah, we can easily convert ourselves new products.
Yeah, until it changes, we have to be good at it. Sorry, Jackie.
No, I was just gonna say like, you know, I can easily picture what inches look like, and I have to think a little harder for you know, centimeters, but it's definitely not a deal killer in any way. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's not, you're right. It's not a make it or break it thing, right? But nice little tip to have. Let's see.
A good question here.
Yeah.
So Digital Plus Media is one of the few programs that has some program specific portfolio requirements. For digital media, for the requirement, it requires 10 samples total, but the general requirement says 10 to 20 examples. Is there a difference in the number of projects for this program? Is there a reasoning why you choose 10 samples, Sean?
I think it's because we'd like the portfolio to give a kind of a clear vision of who you are as an artist and what you're hoping to do in the program. So even though the slide room portal might let you upload more images, I suppose 10 is sort of like our request. If you upload more than 10, you're not gonna be punished for that, like in our review. If the system allows you to, but I think that 10 samples is sort of you know, you could kind of take it in a few different ways. Like like let's say if you're doing installation art, you might need more than one image to kind of show aspects of that, right? We also have it's pretty typical for people to submit time-based media to our program. So we have some stipulations there about video project documentation. You know, if you're uploading videos, please don't give us more than 5 minutes total, right? So you have to curate that, select excerpts, and so forth. So I don't know. Does that kind of get toward the question, Jen? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Yeah.
I'm typing answers over here, Jen, so I don't know if you're seeing.
This is a question for Leslie. I have a background as a printmaker and ceramics both, but I want to apply to MFA ceramics. Is it possible?
I'm assuming that question means, is there also, can there be some crossover to printmaking? But I'm not sure. But yes, as long as we definitely have students coming in with less ceramics experience. And I feel like we structure the program pretty well, where you start out immediately in a materials class that gets you pretty well versed in the materials. And everybody seems to kind of catch up pretty quickly. And honestly, I'd say we like having kind of diversity coming in terms of knowledge sets, where, you know, we've had sculptors and we've had textile artists, we've had different people come in and quickly get pretty well versed in the clay. And in terms of opportunities to possibly cross those two media, I actually am currently teaching a ceramics and print class, and in the spring, printmaking is actually also giving us a second class to offer. That's going to be a crossover between ceramic students and printmaking students. So we are been cultivating that relationship in terms of those two media, and, you know, both very process oriented. But we have and then also, we actually just unloaded it yesterday. We have a new digital decal printer that just arrived, that's replacing one that had kind of gotten old and wasn't working well. So now we can do larger format digital ceramic prints that can get fused and fired onto pieces. So we definitely have that aspect to the program. Hope that answered the question.
That's great. Thank you so much, Leslie. Let's see here. This is another one for you, Leslie. When reviewing ceramics portfolio, is it generally better to showcase one type of work, such as utilitarianism, sculpture, installation, etc., or is a variety of work encouraged?
I think it's I would recommend highlighting what you think you want to focus in graduate school. So if you think you want to go the route of installation, then show more installation work. But it's also fine to show, like, say you've been a production potter and you decided you want to be an installation artist, go ahead and show that production work to kind of show where you came from, and, you know, what might be directing you towards that new direction. But I would, again, it's kind of like, you know, somebody said, we don't want to see 20 different things and we don't know what the direction is, or the kind of path you think you want to take. That also doesn't mean you may stick with that path once you get to school. Like, I actually had a colleague when I went to graduate school who applied with production work and graduated doing figurative sculpture. So, you know, there may be these things where once you get access to facilities, you may find a different direction. But I would say, in terms of us looking at what to, you know, we want to see in terms of accepting somebody, again, is that, do we see a possible direction or two or three? But we will not hold you to that direction once you're in.
You know, I just want to, it brought something up really important. When when we say 10 to 20 pieces of work, I would not, sometimes people think, as Jackie, you said, you want to see 20, right? You know, but I also think for some departments, don't feel like you have to get to 20 and show really work that isn't relevant or isn't as good or doesn't relate to what you want to show us, right? Don't feel like you have to do that. That's why we say 10 to 20. I'd rather see 15 like solid, a solid portfolio versus 20 showing us like some photos that you went on a trip and took, right? So really consider that editorial sort of phase of this of the application process. I had a questionnaire that I wanted to answer and I can't find it. Oh, this one is for Sean. This is the one I wanted to ask. For digital media, can you talk a little bit about which you would prefer in terms of analog or digital? In terms of, can we submit both? Should it be one or the other?
Oh, that's a good question. So, really, I think, you know, one of the kind of lenses the digital media department works through is it's not only digital, right? So analog technology is certainly a component there, and in some ways you can kind of think about ways in which various media might be in conversation or combined with like newer technologies or emerging technologies. So if you're somebody that's like doing like doing a bit of media archaeology, let's call it, looking at older forms of technology and kind of seeing what the possibilities still are in those media, like that's still very much something that we're interested in looking at in terms of portfolio. Um, I think I saw one question that could be maybe related to this, and it was a question of like, for digital media, is including traditional media or graphic design.
Yeah, that was the question I reached.
Yeah. So, so let me address it like maybe just a slightly different way. So
Yeah, please.
like we do have a graphic design department, for instance, right? So if you were submitting graphic design work to a digital media portfolio, we'd have a question. We'd say like, well, why is this person applying to digital media and not graphic design? So I think in terms of like the images you select, there's a bit of storytelling to do, right? In those images. And so it should be clear to us as your reviewers that it's not something that's just like, oh, and they also do this, right? Like that shouldn't also be really something that it should be cohesive, in those 10 samples, if that makes sense. But that's not to say you couldn't include those things. So if we're thinking traditional media, we love people that can draw and that can paint, right? That's great. But how does that fit within the digital media program, right, is the question, and not the painting department, for instance.
We have
Absolutely.
we have a similar question about somebody asking about glass blowing and painting, and kind of similarly, like if it specifically relates to your work in a way that brings more to your painting or more to your interest, I think that definitely show it. If it's you took a glass blowing class and you made like a basic, object that would be made in a beginner glass blowing class, I don't think it is necessarily going to add. Like you can say in your writing that you've taken classes and you're interested in, trying. I mean, I don't know how. Anyway, that is, it's how much adding to your specific idea of what you want to do.
We get that question a lot, Jackie, actually, because students are like, I took this 101 class. Should I submit it? No. But if there's an intention to explore that material more, that's something you can talk about in your statement of purpose, right? To really show sort of those ideas.
I can't guarantee access to anything in glass blowing, though, you know what I mean?
Obviously, right, exactly. That's the access to something else that.
Yeah, so there's that as well.
Can I actually do a little add-on to the ceramics and printmaking?
Sure.
Just in case I missed it. It's also okay to include some of the printmaking images in that portfolio. So I think Marianne talked about that too with textiles, where, I mean, we actually have a current graduate student who submitted some paintings along with the ceramic work, and it really helped us understand how, and the reason they did that was because these pieces were very textured, and it let us understand how that could translate to the ceramic work. And it's really, and it's currently happening. So, but it was a good choice to add those in, even though they weren't ceramic. So again, it's that balance of that information, but understanding a direction you may want to go with the ceramics or the other media based on other media you've worked with is okay to put in there.
Yeah, and speaking about media and disciplines, RISD requires you to apply to one graduate program. You cannot apply to others. Like Leslie and most folks here have said, there are ways potentially to experiment with different materials, and there are a lot of different spaces and places on campus to be able to do that. But I also just want to plug our open house. So we have a week-long online session with every single graduate department. So if you're unsure, first you do your research, you go online, you look at the faculty, you look at student work. That's already done. Now you get to go on to these online sessions. You can go to different ones to find out sort of and ask those questions. Is ceramics the right fit, or is it printmaking? And so I think that that's a really great way to feel like, okay, the values and the outcomes or whatever it is that you want to know about those specific programs, you can attend multiple of those. And then we'll also have an in-person open house where at the end of the week, you'll get to see some of the facilities or studios that are discipline centered to that program. So I'm just going to put in the chat right here how you sign up for that open house so that you can explore different programs, but do your research first. That's my advice.
I would also recommend, and this may apply to most programs, look at our Instagram. We're RISD_ceramics, but we have a graduate student running it. We always showcase the first year graduate students every year. We haven't done that yet this year. She'll start doing that soon. But look at the work that's being coming out of the programs and
100%.
see if you respond to it. But that's our most up to date, what is going on now, like way to find out versus the website.
Yeah, and I just want to share my screen for 1 second. I want to show you guys, like, where are we finding all of these things? So this is just one example of the ceramics page, the master's program on RISD.edu. So you go down, you can click on some different things. It has images of work here, but it also has alumni profiles, has featured stories of what's happening in the program. And there is a page like this for every single one of our graduate programs. So when I say do your research, that's what I'm talking about. And then there's all bios of all the faculty, of course. I think that's an important piece too. So thanks for bringing that up. We're running out of questions, which is absolutely crazy. I think we've just been typing a lot of answers. So type your questions and we can answer questions like how big our programs are. I think that's a big question that we get asked a lot. How big are your programs? What's the ratio? What sizes are classes? Let's talk about shops. What do we have access to? Things like that. So that's just to spur on some questions from our participants here. But if anybody wants to jump in and talk about some things that we have here that, you know, might be different or set us apart, that would be great. Here they come. Okay. Do painters have personal studio space? I think every one of you can answer the question about studio space and what that looks like, depending on what program you're in. So Jackie, let's start with you.
Yeah, so painters do have personal studio spaces. Your first year, you split a space. There's 2 people in a studio, and then your second year, you get a large space to yourself.
Yeah. And that looks different. Leslie?
Ceramics, actually where yes, you have studio space. We are housed within the ceramics department, meaning so the graduate students are actually in a different location in Fletcher, downtown. But our graduate students are on the same floor as the kilns and the glaze room and all of that, and also interact a lot with our undergraduate students, which I actually think is the strength of the program, that we're right there. But we typically have, right now we have 8 graduate students, so we typically bring in, it's a 2-year program. I think everybody should know that. We typically bring in 4 or 5 a year is our kind of goal number.
Yep. And similarly, the next question is how many students are accepted into painting? I think the bigger question is how many students are you looking to enroll? And that changes. Leslie, you said yours 4 or 5, right? Jackie, it's
10.
it's been 10, so we'll just say 10. Marianne?
Yeah, textiles brings in typically 6 grads per year, so our cohort is 12. That we have a one shared space. All the grads share space. That you all have desk space, and then there's equipment in their studio as well that is shared. But then our department has a lot of equipment, so we don't have as much real estate per person as far as independent studio space because we're so equipment heavy. But the grads do have a shared space that they each have their own space within. And then they're also working just together as well as interface with our undergrads just because of some of the classes that have highly technical, like Jacquard, et cetera, components. So, yeah.
Marianne, I actually have a question because I've been in that space before, and it does appear like each student sort of can customize their space a little bit based on what they're working with. Is that right?
Yeah, every year, the second year grads basically rearrange the whole studio, what they think is ideal. There's a crit space in their CIT grad studio. There's like an area of like looms, etc. Then they each have a personal space. It's sort of like, it's not big, it's just like within space. It's like has a desk and they put up these walls so that they have some sense of, just can close themselves off if they need time to themselves, right? Yeah. But they rearrange it every year. They just, they work together to decide how they want it that year. Yeah.
And I guess in that same vein, everybody's customizing their own space, right? Just depends what facilities you need, what things you need to be able to, whether it be a light tight space or whatever it may be. Sean, want to talk about size and space?
Sure. In digital media, we typically have about 12 students per class, so that's about 24 roughly grad students in the digital media program. We have pretty much like an open floor plan on our floor over in the CIT building. So everybody gets a sort of like a cubicle within in that space. And then, similar to Marianne was discussing like kind of access to tools and specialized tools and equipment, like we also have that in digital media. So that's part of the reason that we don't have individual studios per se, because there's a lot that is done in collaboration with others and sharing equipment and resources that we have on the floor and in some other facilities around campus.
That's great, thank you. There's a couple of questions that came in that are very similar, and you kind of touched upon this already, as you can't guarantee students access to other shops and studios, but can you speak a little bit to the ability for interdisciplinary study and access to other facilities for students? Anyone want to chime in on that? Oh, thank you.
Let me just, all right, co-works, spatial audio studio, all the wood shops, like things that are somewhat available to everyone. And then there are other ways to specifically get at different things. And I also just want to mention Brown University, you can take classes there too, as an elective that can also support what you're doing here. But can you guys talk about like, there are obviously things that anybody could have access to, but what if I wanted to take a specific class in textiles, say Marianne?
Yeah, if there's space in the class, we always welcome non-majors. Sometimes we have a packed cohort that we're using up all the spaces. And sometimes there's space. So we welcome interdisciplinarity when we can provide it. And then there's and some are upper level classes like the Jacquard loom. I rarely can just jump into the Jacquard loom use with, class without having taken a different level of weaving so you understand structure. But I think the grad space has some grad interdisciplinary courses, or sometimes departments collaborate on a course specifically so we can break down those barriers. Certain departments, I don't want to speak for glass, but I think they really encourage the kind of collaborative and look for, really work a lot with majors as does printmaking. So it just depends on the class. I don't think any of the faculty or departments like to be siloed, but sometimes just serving our department students first is the priority. And if there's space, then we welcome it. And we actually try to create classes when we can that are interdisciplinary. But it's not always so easy just because we have to serve our cohort first.
Yeah, we're a small school. We have limited space. Space is extremely important because everything we do is pretty gosh darn immersive. But I also wanted to see if someone could talk about independent study programs, maybe.
Molly, I would not go that route in terms of just because we're changing things, we're not pushing that route that much anymore. But I will say, like my 4 second-year grads are all in interdisciplinary classes. One's in the retooling class from sculpture, which is fantastic. And the tech who teaches that is very conscious about making sure he has like 2 people from each department in that. There's 2 that are in the glass class. That's a very research oriented, again, very specific, but a mostly grad level class. There's 3 that are in after school special, which is with sculpture, and it's focusing on curating and creating a work for an exhibit in New York. So I feel like at the grad level, it's becoming a little more accessible in terms of classes like that. But in terms of finding specific things, it is about navigating, but it does seem like the students usually find the classes they're looking for. It could be woodworking or, you know, a print class or something. But again, it's very much what Marianne said, but I'm always impressed at how nimble the graduate students become in terms of navigating and networking and getting to know
Advocating,
people.
yes.
And
Yeah.
they just always seem to find their way with the right classes. And so have confidence in that they understand and they talk to each other and they really work that. And what I really like to see too is the friends they make from the other departments. That's where I think the silos break down, is they really do, and they have people in their studios, they're going back and forth. So there's just those options.
They've
But it's
also,
really up to that individual on how they navigate. Is the way I look at it.
Mhm.
this is brand new, but the grads have just initiated to like a crit that's open for all grads to attend. And I think it's like really early on, but I think so far it's going really well. And usually like the interdisciplinary stuff won't happen until a little bit later. Like it definitely won't happen your first semester. Maybe second, but we as GPDs try to advocate too. It's like if I have
Right.
a grad student who really wants to be in a ceramics class or in a weaving class, like we'll reach out to each other and try to see if there's space. And if there is, then it can usually happen. But it really does have a lot to do with like how crowded the classrooms are at that specific time.
We also haven't mentioned winter session,
Yeah.
which in graduates, is it the first year graduates now they're right there with their freshmen with first selection. So that's definitely the place to go to take an out of major class.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to what that is. I think the really important thing to take away, because we're almost at time here, is really in grad school, you have the unique ability to advocate for yourself. There, you know, and I think that is something that our grads do really well. And, you know, thinking about grad exchange, the grad studies, and kind of advocating for what you want out of your education. And obviously the faculty are on your team, so they're on your side. Any last final things? We have a few more questions here. A lot of them are very similar, want to know how competitive we are, what the critiques are like, things like that. I think that might be a nice question to end on. If you guys wouldn't mind staying for just another 2 minutes. Can you talk about critique? Is it really competitive, or how is critique, you know, how do you do it here versus other places? Because I know some students are coming in with maybe some different experiences of what critique is.
I would say I feel like here we're a little more formal in terms of like final reviews, midterms and final reviews. At least in ceramics, we have every student, including the undergrads, has to have a final review. We bring in external people. But I will also say I wouldn't call them competitive. We're going for something that's constructive, that's going to really help forward that student. So it's a, an honest but positive environment, I would say, in terms of what we're trying to get the student through. And we really kind of encourage the students to drive their own critiques to come in ready to ask the questions they want answered. So it's not about just expecting the faculty and the guests to comment. Is you need to also control your own critique. So there's a lot of that. Yeah.
So you set the tone, I think. I think that's something coming to a portfolio review can help you understand what that is. Anything else, Marianne, Jackie, Sean, you want to add to that?
Well, in painting, we do it a little differently. We have midterms, which are a little bit past the midterm rather than final critiques. It sort of sets things up for obviously students show completed work, but it kind of prioritizes process and that things are never ending. And again, like all the students participate, all the faculty who attend are there. We often bring in outside guests too, and it's a big conversation. It's rigorous, it's challenging, but it's definitely not meant to defeat people. You know, it's supportive too. And yeah, you know, we really try to get at meaning and how people are seeing the work, and if the student is you know, matching, squaring what they're trying to do with how people are perceiving it, and all other kinds of challenge.
That's what it's about though, right? You're here to be challenged. I like to think. Anyone else? Sean, you want to add? Aaron? Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think you come in with your cohort. I've always seen nothing but support in most cases. You come in with your cohort and you know, you meet the current students in the program, and really you're there to help elevate each other. And that's really what I've seen through coming to critiques. So I just want to say thank you for staying over 3 minutes. I appreciate your time. I know you probably have lots of things going on. You guys are amazing, and it's not over yet. We'll see you at open house. Thank you all so much for your time. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.